Goeiedei and welkom. My name is Amarenske and today I will be doing a review of The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden. This is a very popular book on BookTube right now, and I can see why people like it so much, why it is so popular, but let me tell you about why I think it might be at least slightly overhyped. First we go with the plot. The main idea of the book is we follow our character Vasilya Petrovna, in other words Vasya, as she grows up and develops her magical abilities a little bit, while she gets a stepmother because her mother died while she was born. But she does get a stepmother who, like her, can see the Chetty, but she thinks they are demons and she wants all the ancient lore gone. And she wants everyone to be a Christian. So we follow the plot of the stepmother and how she deals with all that stuff going around and all the political stuff. And we also follow Vasya's perspective as she discovers more and more of those house-dwelling and nature-dwelling spirits called the Chetty, but also about the frost demon, who in this book is called Morozko. And I thought especially the mythological component and the Chetty component in this book felt very magical, very real, and very well developed and well done. And I really liked it. I find it a shame that we didn't get to see more of what Vasya's magical powers are among those creatures and in general, except for seeing and talking to those spirits. But I did like the plotline that happens a little bit, because this book starts with a story about Frost, or the Frost Demon, and the fairy tale that takes place that reminded me a whole lot of Valhalla, in the sense that we see a girl being put out of the house by her stepmother. In this case, the father still lives in Valhalla. The father, I think, is dead. It's a very hard-working, non-complaining girl, and the frost demon finds her. And because she does not complain, she gets a whole lot of money and dowry so she can marry a proper man. And then her sister is sent there to get the same dowry, but the only thing the stepsister does is complain, or half-sister, whatever it was. The only thing she does is complain, and in the end she's found back dead because the frost demon did not value her complaining. That is the story where it starts with, and it's similar with Frau Holle, who punishes lazy children that don't listen to their parents, but rewards children who work hard and listen to their parents well. That's something similar to this. But we start off with that fairy tale, and it's integrated into the plot of the story, although this book isn't really plot driven at all. We just follow it. It's more of a slice of life, Vasya growing up type of story, although huge parts of the books, especially in the beginning, don't really follow Vasya's development and instead follow her father and what he does with his other children when they get married or end up somewhere else. And then at a certain point we do switch a lot to Vasya's character, but also the character of a priest called Konstantin, who falls for a voice in his head. Of course he thinks it's God at first. And I thought at a certain point it felt a little bit like he was becoming schizophrenic, or he was listening to maybe a not so nice force at all. And I think that component was very well done because it has a little bit to do with the magic. What I did like the little bit of politics we saw when they did go to Moscow, and when Vasya's sister did end up marrying to like a prince or so. And also what her brother ended up doing with going to a monastery, and that we had a little bit of a story about what happened to them and how they are living right now, years and years later, because Vasya asks about it years and years later, and we get a nice fun story about what her relatively free-spirited brother is doing as like a monk. But he is not the regular monk, and the other monks in the monastery don't necessarily always like what he is doing. And I thought it was a little fun twist. I do hope, if I go on and read the next book, that we do get more of those specific characters that went to Moscow or the neighborhood of Moscow, the vicinity of Moscow, and we do get to see more of them. Because it feels like we would, otherwise it would be a little bit pointless to just mindlessly put in those characters. What I also did really like is in the end, when the plot actually starts, because we have the fairy tale in the beginning and hints throughout the book that actually something very similar is going to happen to Vasya. Because we know from the beginning, when she gets born, that her mother wants her. She doesn't want to abort her daughter at all, because she wants a special daughter like her mother got her, because she can then give her magical powers to her daughter, which hasn't been working out so far. So we get to see that, and we get to see Vasya grow up, and then when she's 14, 15 at the end of this book, she ends up fleeing into the forest because otherwise she's going to be brought to a convent, which she doesn't want. And then we end up meeting Morosko and his kind of duplicit character, which I think was very well done. I enjoyed the dynamic between Morosko and Vasya and the way they lived together, and he cared for her, but also the way he treated her in the beginning. It feels like it's going a little bit like a hate to love romance, but not really hate in the beginning at all. I generally did like the dynamics between the characters in this book, but what I have to say is the fact that Vasya's father, Pyotr, did, at least in some cases, feel like he was raping his new wife who only wanted to go to a convent. Didn't feel right at all. And he beat Vasya once, but like that fit actually in the culture back then, I think. Parents beating their children when they didn't listen. So that is something I have a little bit less trouble with, because that felt realistic, although it felt a little bit hard to read at times. I did not mind it that much. But what I did mind in this book mostly, because it wasn't really plot driven nor character driven, it was very environmentally driven and very slice of life. But the pacing was a little bit off, because you have the fairy tale in the beginning, and at a very close to the beginning you actually see the real story starting to mirror it, but you get multiple times in the book that characters say, no, another year before Vasya goes with you. She is still a child, and that kind of stuff. Like, that truly slows down the plot. My edition has about 400 pages, and the first 350 felt like or even 250 felt like you should have already been 100 pages further. That is how slow the book felt. Because even though the magical system was interesting, the plotline about the religious and the political components was not developed in a way I like, which made it frustrating and annoying to read instead of just interesting and well integrated in the plot, because it wasn't necessarily that well integrated in the story. It fit that it went this way. It just wasn't necessarily to my liking. So in the end, I think this is a decent book. It's a decent start of a trilogy. I don't think it is as good as a lot of people say they think it is. I do believe that they like it. And most of it will probably be because of the writing, because especially the magical components, they are written very nicely. it fits the kind of magical world this takes place in. It feels a little bit like a fairy tale too. So those components are written well, but the other components are just sometimes very hard to read through, and that also partly has to do with the way they are written as well. So that is what I didn't like. So overall I think it's just, if I had to give it a star rating, it's probably medium to high 3-star. I'm still contemplating if I want to read the sequel, The Girl in the Tower. For now, no. I think I am satisfied with the amount of the world I got in this book, but that might change in the future. I keep it open. Anyway, if you want to give this a shot, of an environmental story set in Russia with a lot of ancient spirits that people used to believe in, is your type of story. If you like mythology and fairy tales, I definitely recommend you give this a shot. Even though I wasn't even let down, it hit my expectation actually quite well, because I went into it prepared. If this sounds like a story you might like, give it a shot. You might love it. You might totally fall into the group that truly loves it and hypes it up, because a lot of people do. I wasn't one of those people. But still, you might enjoy it, so give it a shot. It's not a bad book. But this is it for now. Thank you for watching, and on to the